The conservatory's mirrored dining room was a luxury aquarium, where people dripping with money moved in slow, predictable currents. Crystal chandeliers, like clusters of golden grapes, dripped light onto stiffly starched linen tablecloths, and crystal glasses chiming like distant bells. Seated at the best table, overlooking the tasteful indoor water feature, Arthur waited. His wheelchair, a modern design of carbon fiber, didn't look like an appendage, but an extension of his calm, controlled posture. He watched the waiters' ballet, the silent dance of the couples, and awaited his guest for this blind date, an arrangement set up by mutual friends that he had accepted more out of boredom than hope. Across the room, near the swinging door leading to the bustle of the kitchen, Elisa was drying a wine glass with a white cloth, but her eyes weren't seeing the crystal. They were fixed on the small alcove near the bar where Sophia, her 7-year-old daughter, was sketching intently in a dog-eared notebook, her tongue poking out in concentration. It was a silent agreement with management. Sophia would stay quiet there, invisible, while Elisa finished her shift. The first sound to break the room's calculated harmony wasn't the soft piano music, but a laugh. A metallic laugh that offered no warmth but sliced through the air. Veronica arrived 20 minutes late, enveloped in a silk dress that whispered of her wealth with every step. Her eyes, sharp as shards of glass, swept the room, landed on Arthur, and for an instant, the curiosity on her face morphed into something colder, a veiled sneer. "Arthur, darling, forgive my tardiness," she announced, her voice too loud for the venue. "You wouldn't believe the traffic. An absolute nightmare for those of us who still have to drive their own cars." She sat down, and the smile she offered him didn't reach her eyes. With every sentence that followed, the tension at the table grew like a poisonous vine. "Wow, this place is classic," she commented, implying it was dated. "They still serve these little bread rolls, so nostalgic." The restaurant staff, trained for neutrality, began to visibly tense in their uniforms. Richard, the manager, a man whose life philosophy was "problems don't exist if nobody is looking," approached Elisa. "Total discretion at that table. Understood, serve the water and don't cause a scene." Elisa nodded, her heart tightening. She had a radar for injustice, a sensitive antenna that picked up unspoken pain. And what emanated from that table was a subtle, icy cruelty. Holding the pitcher of ice water, she felt her hands tremble slightly. Sophia looked up from her drawing. Following her mother's movements, the little girl saw everything. The humiliation became explicit when Veronica, after commenting on a charity gala, glanced at Arthur's chair. With her index finger, she drew a mocking circle in the air. "It's a real shame, honestly," she whispered, leaning in as if sharing a secret. "A shame you can't ask me to dance." The entire dining room seemed to hold its breath, but everyone averted their gaze. Feigning sudden interest in their plates or the scenery outside, it was a collective pact of non-involvement. Richard hissed at Elisa again, this time with more urgency. "Now, serve and get out." With her jaw clenched, Elisa approached the table. She felt Arthur's gaze, not of shame, but of profound exhaustion. She felt Veronica's contempt like a slap, and above all, she felt her daughter's eyes, a mirror of her own indignation. She poured water into Arthur's glass and then Veronica's. That's when the unthinkable happened. Sophia stood up, with the silent determination of someone executing a long-rehearsed plan. She crossed the room, took the glass her mother had just filled in front of Veronica, and in a quick, precise movement turned it over, splashing ice water directly onto the woman's face. Silence. An absolute, heavy silence. Cutlery froze mid-air. Conversations died mid-word. Arthur said nothing. He just took a deep breath, the first clean breath in nearly half an hour, and the entire restaurant, with its mirrors and golden light, plunged into a sudden, chilling emotional eclipse, waiting for what would come next. The silence shattered with a sharp scream. Veronica leaped to her feet, the silk of her dress now stained and clinging to her skin, her face twisted into a mask of disbelief and fury. Water droplets dripped from her perfectly coiffed hair, running down her expensive makeup. "Insolent, ill-mannered brat!" she bellowed, her voice echoing through the petrified room. Her eyes flashed, not at little Sophia, but directly at Elisa, who had already rushed to pull her daughter behind her in an instinctive gesture of protection. "This is outrageous. I demand this woman be fired now. Right now." Richard, the manager, materialized beside the table, his hands gesturing in frantic apologies. "Ms. Veronica, please, I offer 1,000 apologies. This is unacceptable. We will resolve this immediately." But Veronica wasn't listening. She pointed a trembling, accusatory finger at Elisa. "This is what happens when you hire just anyone. Poor people's manners are always like this. They don't know how to behave. I'm going to sue this restaurant. I'm going to sue you for emotional distress." As the drama unfolded in the center of the room, a subtle movement occurred at the peripheral tables. Two silver-haired ladies, regulars for afternoon tea, exchanged a meaningful look. One of them discreetly placed her cell phone on the table, recording. At another table, an older couple, who seemed absorbed in their dessert until then, did the same. Trembling hands and awkward angles began to capture the scene, not the act of the water itself, but the torrent of poison that followed. Richard, sensing the danger of exposure more than the weight of the injustice, grabbed Elisa by the arm and pulled her into a corner. "Are you crazy? Bringing your daughter here was already a favor. Look what you've done." Elisa tried to speak, to defend Sophia, but he wouldn't let her. "You're suspended. Temporarily. Go home. And make sure that girl never steps foot in here again. Understand?" The words hit her like stones. Suspended. No pay. With rent due. Mother and daughter left through the back door, the same one used for the trash chute. The night air, previously a promise of relief, now felt heavy and cold. Elisa's uniform was still damp at the waist where some water had splashed. In Sophia's backpack, the drawing pad was crumpled, one of the pages torn in the haste to leave. They walked in silence, hand in hand, defeat and shame weighing on their shoulders. Elisa felt a knot in her throat, a bitter mix of pride for her daughter's courage and overwhelming terror for the future. Outside, on the sidewalk, Arthur watched them walk away. His driver was already waiting with the car door open. An impulse made him want to call them back, to offer help, to do something. But he hesitated. What would he say? What could he do? He didn't want to be seen as a savior, a millionaire handing out charity. The injustice physically hurt him more than any obstacle his chair imposed. But the fear of turning his condition into a spectacle of goodwill paralyzed him. He just watched, jaw clenched, as Sophia's small figure and Elisa's stooped silhouette disappeared into the darkness. When they arrived home, in the cramped two-room apartment, reality crashed down on Elisa. She took off her uniform, sat on the edge of the bed, and looked at her daughter, who watched her with wide, worried eyes. Their silence was louder than Veronica's screams. Elisa opened her purse, searching for something, anything, to point her way forward. She found only the house key, a tissue, and a single crumpled dollar bill. It was all she had until the next payday, a payday she now wasn't sure would come. The image of that solitary dollar, shining under the weak lamplight, seemed to mock her. It summarized her situation, alone, exposed, and completely broke. How could she protect her daughter if she couldn't even protect herself? That night's defeat felt absolute, final, an insurmountable wall erected before them. The next morning dawned gray and silent. Elisa woke up with the sensation of having swallowed glass shards during sleep. Every breath was a scratch in her chest, a physical reminder of the previous night's humiliation. The apartment felt smaller, the walls closer, the air thin. Sophia wasn't in her bed. Elisa found her sitting on the living room floor, the drawing pad in her lap. But the pencil was still. She stared at the blank page with a seriousness that didn't belong to a 7-year-old. Elisa's fear wasn't just about lacking money for rent or the dwindling food supply. It was a deeper fear, the fear of seeing the light in her daughter's eyes go out, replaced by that shadow of resignation she knew so well. How could she explain to Sophia that her act of courage, of pure, crystalline justice, might cost them the roof over their heads? The phone rang, jarringly loud, breaking the heavy silence. It was Mrs. Davies, her upstairs neighbor, a woman with breathy urgency and a huge heart. "Elisa, honey, did you see? It's on the neighborhood mums group chat. Someone filmed it." Elisa didn't immediately understand. Davies sent the link. It was a short, shaky video shot from a distance. The image quality was poor, but the audio was surprisingly clear. It captured Veronica's outburst, her insults, her arrogance, and then, amidst the socialite's fury, a small, firm voice cut through, spoken by Sophia to her mother while hiding behind her. "Don't cry, Mom. Real class doesn't step on other people." That phrase, spoken with a child's innocent wisdom, changed everything. It wasn't an attack, it was a defense, a lesson. The narrative, which had been about an ill-mannered brat, began to pivot, however tentatively. In the comments, several neighborhood women expressed support. How awful that woman spoke to her. The girl was just defending her mother. It was a small flame of hope in the darkness. This flame, however, also illuminated Veronica's rage. Alerted by a friend about the circulating video, she felt her perfectly curated world tremble. Her image, her status, her social capital, all painstakingly built, were being threatened by a waitress and her daughter. Public opinion was a battlefield she could not afford to lose. Immediately, she called her image consultant, a man specialized in turning disasters into opportunities. Then, she called Richard, the manager of the conservatory. Her voice was pure ice. She didn't shout, she decreed. She demanded a public reparation, a staged performance where the waitress would apologize for her inappropriate behavior and the trauma caused. It would be one photo, one note for the local press, a clean victory. Elisa's phone rang again. This time, it was Richard. His voice was a tense whisper, the voice of a cornered man. "Elisa, listen. Ms. Veronica is coming here with her consultant." He paused, the sound of his heavy breathing on the other end. She wants a public apology. She'll drop the lawsuit and negative publicity if you come here and apologize for your daughter's actions. Elisa felt the floor disappear beneath her. The two paths before her were abysses. Denying the charade meant definitive termination, the end of any chance to recover her job. Accepting meant spitting on Sophia's courage, teaching her daughter that the powerful always win and that dignity has a price. It meant branding herself forever as the town's rude one, shaming herself and worse, the girl she loved most in the world. Richard, sensing her silence, pressed, "Elisa, you have 1 hour to decide. What's it going to be?" While Elisa faced her dilemma, Arthur was having lunch, alone. He returned to the conservatory deliberately, a subtle act of defiance. He chose a different table, in a more secluded corner, but still within the main dining room. The atmosphere was charged. The servers moved with a rigidity that hadn't existed before, exchanging furtive glances. Elisa's absence was notable, a vacuum in the usual service flow. He searched for her with his eyes, even knowing he wouldn't find her. The server who attended him, a young woman named Clara with frightened eyes, nearly dropped the menu as she approached. Arthur calmed her with a gentle smile. "I'd like to know if Elisa is working today." Clara swallowed hard. She was suspended, sir." The confirmation hit Arthur like a punch to the gut. He maintained his composure, thanked her for the information, and ordered only sparkling water. The food wouldn't go down. After a few minutes, he summoned the manager. Richard approached, his professional smile plastered on, but the tension in his shoulders was visible. "Mr. Arthur, what a pleasure to have you back with us. Any issues?" Arthur was direct, his voice low but carrying a weight that made every word resonate. "Richard, I had an ongoing negotiation for the catering of my company's annual event. A considerable contract. One of the partners involved in the event is the group Ms. Veronica is associated with." He paused, letting the information sink in. "Considering last night's events and the decision to suspend your employee, I must inform you that I will be cancelling that contract. I cannot associate my company's name with an establishment that tolerates the kind of behavior I witnessed and penalizes the victim." Richard went pale. The color drained from his face, leaving behind a waxy mask. That catering contract was a fortune for the restaurant, the salvation of the quarter. "Sir, please reconsider. Business is business. It was an isolated situation, a misunderstanding." Richard's voice was almost a plea. He was trapped between two forces. On one side, Veronica's immediate poisonous influence in the city's social circuit. On the other, Arthur's much larger, silent financial power, a man whose wealth was vast and diversified, with investments ranging from tech to luxury real estate. Losing Veronica as a client was an annoyance. Losing Arthur's contract was a disaster. "It wasn't a misunderstanding, Richard. It was a choice, and you made yours," Arthur said, his voice final. In the kitchen, Clara, the young server, relayed the conversation in whispers to the chef, a burly, fair man who held Elisa in high regard. The chef, in turn, called her. "Elisa, it's Jean-Pierre. Listen, that gentleman in the wheelchair, he came back. And he just cancelled a huge contract because of you. He's on your side." Elisa's heart leapt, a wave of hope mixed with panic. Someone important was fighting for her, but the relief was short-lived. She looked at the dining room, where Sophia was now drawing, oblivious to everything. This fight, despite the unexpected allies, still terrified her. This wasn't a dispute over power or large sums of money. Elisa's goal was simple and immense: protect her daughter's dignity and keep the job that guaranteed them the minimum to survive. She felt like a small vessel caught in a storm between two ocean liners, and the storm was just beginning. The hour Richard had given her was nearly up, and the decision she made would seal her and Sophia's fate, perhaps forever. The conservatory smelled of toasting butter and freshly ground coffee, scents that normally promised comfort and indulgence, but now seemed only to mask the icy atmosphere that had settled over the dining room. Arthur finished his water, his mind racing. He felt frustrated by his own hesitation the previous night. Cancelling the contract had been a financial blow, a calculated move on the business board, but it didn't touch the core issue. It was impersonal. Something was missing. As he maneuvered his chair to leave, an elderly gentleman dressed in a light linen suit with neatly combed white hair rose from a nearby table. He was one of the restaurant's oldest patrons, known for his discretion and refined palate. The man approached Arthur with a respectful nod. "Excuse me, sir," he said softly. "I believe this belongs to the little girl." He extended a folded linen napkin. Arthur took it, confused. Unfolding it, his heart seized. It was a drawing, a sketch done in colored pencil, unmistakably Sophia's work. She must have dropped it in the confusion the night before. The drawing depicted their table, a large, smiling figure in the wheelchair, a female figure in a shining dress with a scowl, and a waitress nearby wearing a makeshift halo above her head. Below the drawing, a sentence written in a child's wavering handwriting, "The right table doesn't humiliate." Those 5 words, so simple and so profound, struck Arthur with the force of a revelation. This wasn't about charity or business. It was about fundamental human decency. That napkin wasn't just a piece of cloth. It was a manifesto. In that moment, Arthur made a decision. He would no longer be an observer. He would invite Elisa and Sophia, not to offer money, which would be easy and humiliating, but for something more meaningful. Arthur silently funded a social project, a small incubator that helped vulnerable people develop their talents and start small businesses. There were workshops in culinary arts, sewing, design. Perhaps there was a place there for Elisa. Perhaps a scholarship for the little artist. However, he knew the unwritten rules of his world well, and the suffocating etiquette of places like the conservatory, where silence is confused with elegance. Exposing his project, using this situation to promote it, could turn a genuine initiative into cheap marketing, a spectacle of virtue. He would have to act with the same delicacy and precision as the drawing on the napkin. Meanwhile, Elisa, phone in hand, was fighting her own battle. Her immediate priority was survival. She needed to prove she wasn't a problem, a source of conflict. After Jean-Pierre's call, she received another, this time from a colleague at the front desk. Elisa, some letters from customers have arrived. They're supporting the restaurant, saying it's a family place, but the colleague's voice faltered. But they're blaming clueless people who bring their kids to work. Every word was a stab. They didn't see the injustice, only the breach of protocol. Her name, her situation, was being reduced to an inconvenience. To make matters worse, the reminder for the rent due date flashed on her cell phone. Suspension without pay meant a hole she didn't know how to fill. Desperate, she called the owner of a bakery in the neighboring area where she had done some side gigs. She secured an extra shift, midnight to 6 a.m. Burning eyes, hands that would crack from detergent. It was that or eviction. That night, exhausted and defeated, she sat next to Sophia on the bed. "I'm sorry, my love," she whispered, her voice thick. "I'm sorry I couldn't protect you." Sophia, with a wisdom that seemed to come from elsewhere, simply took her notebook and held it out to her mother. "It's okay, Mom. Draw a different ending with me." The smell of fresh bread baking before dawn was, under other circumstances, one of Elisa's favorite scents. But that morning, mixed with the strong odor of industrial cleaning solution, it only intensified the nausea in her empty stomach. Her hands, submerged in the hot sink water, were red and sore. Every pot she scrubbed seemed to weigh a ton, a physical burden mirroring the weight on her soul. The bakery owner, a kind but overworked man, let her work in silence, sensing she wasn't up for conversation. Elisa's mind, however, wouldn't stop. Richard's proposal echoed in her head: humiliate her daughter to save her job. The words of support from Jean-Pierre and Arthur's gesture were a balm, but they didn't pay the rent, and the customer letters blaming her for bringing Sophia to work opened an even deeper wound. It was as if society itself had decided that her poverty was her greatest sin. As the first sun gilded the bakery windows, Richard's phone vibrated insistently in his pocket. It was messages from the restaurant chain's board of directors. The video, even short and low quality, had reached them. The concern wasn't about justice or the dignity of an employee, it was about the brand image. The word lawsuit floated in the air like a ghost. Pressured, Richard took what he considered the middle ground, the path of least resistance. He wouldn't fire Elisa, but he wouldn't defend her either. He would bury her in restaurant bureaucracy. Arthur, meanwhile, hadn't slept. He spent the night researching, making discreet contacts. He wasn't just a successful businessman. His fortune was built on a solid foundation of analysis and strategy. He knew the group that controlled the Le Rêve chain. He knew the board members, their strengths and weaknesses, and most importantly, he had a card up his sleeve, a secret he had kept for years, an early investment made through a discreet fund that gave him a minority, but significant, stake in the restaurant chain itself. He had never exercised his power, preferring to act as a silent observer. But Sophia's drawing in his pocket reminded him that silence, sometimes, is the sound of complicity. He didn't want to expose his position, not to turn Elisa's fight into a demonstration of his power. He wanted justice to prevail on its own merit, but he was prepared. The end of the week approached, bringing the climax of this silent battle. Richard, feeling the pressure from all sides, from Veronica, from the board, and from the threatening void left by Arthur, made his final decision. He called Elisa. "Elisa, good news. The board has decided to reconsider. You won't be fired." Elisa felt such intense relief that she had to lean against the wall. "But," Richard continued, his voice hardening, "there are conditions. You will be reinstated. However, your daughter is permanently banned from entering the restaurant, not even the staff area, and to compensate for the disruption, you will work a double shift this Saturday, with no break. Take it or leave it." Elisa's hope dissolved, leaving a bitter, peppery taste in her mouth. Was this a victory? Yes, but a partial, mutilated victory. She looked at her front door, imagining Sophia on the other side. Accepting meant surrendering a piece of her soul. Agreeing that her daughter's presence was a problem. Refusing meant the abyss. With a choked voice, swallowing her pride and pain, she replied, "I accept." Saturday at the conservatory arrived heavily, weighted with nearly palpable tension. Elisa put on a clean uniform, but it felt like uncomfortable armor. Leaving Sophia with Mrs. Davies was the hardest part. The girl didn't cry, but her large, silent eyes asked a question Elisa couldn't answer. Why? Upon entering the restaurant, the atmosphere was conspiratorial. Some colleagues greeted her with discreet nods. Others averted their gaze, afraid of being associated with the problem. Richard received her with bureaucratic coldness, handing her the day's schedule. It would be a 12-hour shift, no break, a punishment disguised as an opportunity. At noon, the unexpected happened. The front desk phone rang. It was a large reservation for 12 people for afternoon tea. The host, a lady with a firm, polite voice, made a specific request. "We would like to be served by the waitress, Elisa, the girl from the video. We were told she is excellent." The receptionist stammered but confirmed. When Richard found out, his face contorted into a mask of panic. Was it a trap, a provocation? He couldn't refuse such a large reservation. It was the ladies from the neighborhood book club, longtime influential patrons, women whose husbands and sons controlled a considerable portion of the city's capital, and they wanted Elisa. At 4 in the afternoon, they arrived. 12 women, all over 60, elegantly dressed, exuding a perfume of quiet authority. They occupied the largest table in the room, turning it into their headquarters. Elisa approached, her heart hammering against her ribs. The group leader, the same one who made the reservation, Mrs. Cecilia, smiled at her. A genuine smile, without a trace of pity. "Elisa, dear, we'd like chamomile tea for everyone. And please, bring us your best key lime pie." The request was simple, but the tone was one of unquestionable command. As Elisa served, the women chatted, loud enough to be heard at neighboring tables. They didn't discuss the incident, but values. They spoke about how true elegance wasn't in the price of the wine, but in the respect with which people are treated. When Richard nervously approached to ask if everything was satisfactory, Mrs. Cecilia looked at him over her gold-rimmed glasses. "Manager, almost everything is perfect. Just one thing is missing." She paused dramatically, ensuring everyone around heard. "We would like to know the conservatory's official policy on respect and inclusion. And when you plan to hire people with disabilities to work here, on the front line, not hidden away in the kitchen, so the restaurant reflects the values of the community that frequents it." The silence that followed was deafening. Richard, pale and sweating profusely, mumbled a vague promise to evaluate the suggestion. The women just smiled, a collective smile that clearly indicated they were not suggesting anything. They were demanding. Elisa, standing near the sideboard, felt a surge of strength flow through her body. She was no longer alone. This afternoon tea was not a meal, it was a silent revolution. The tables had turned in a way that no one, certainly not Richard or Veronica, could have predicted. The silent revolution of the tea ladies echoed through the walls of the conservatory, but Veronica was not one to surrender to subtlety. Upon learning of the show of support for Elisa, her fury turned into guerrilla strategy. Public opinion was an unstable field, and she needed to regain control of the narrative. She mobilized her consultant and, in less than 24 hours, promoted a parallel event, a brunch for peace at another trendy restaurant. She invited a small army of digital influencers, people whose currency was image and whose loyalty could be bought with a good meal and the promise of visibility. The theme was vague. More love, less aggression, but the target was clear. Amid photogenic dishes and glasses of rosé sparkling wine, Veronica gave her statement. With rehearsed tears, she spoke of the scare, the unprovoked attack she suffered from an uncontrolled child. The video that circulated on social media was edited, cutting her insults and focusing only on the moment the water hit her, followed by close-ups of her shocked face. The caption was a masterpiece of manipulation. Cancel culture has come for the children. How long will we tolerate violence? The noise generated was enough. The comments polarized. The fear that had begun to dissipate in Elisa's heart returned with full force. The story was no longer about the humiliation of a man or the courage of a mother, but about an aggressive child. Sophia's name was being tarnished. Inside the conservatory, the impact was immediate. The whispers returned, more poisonous than before. Colleagues who had shown solidarity now avoided her. The subtle boycott was a form of self-protection. No one wanted to get caught in the crossfire. Richard, feeling the pressure of the new wave of negative publicity, called Elisa into his office. The small, windowless room felt like a cell. "Elisa, this is getting out of control," he said, rubbing his temples. "The restaurant's reputation is at stake. I can't have an employee who is the center of this much controversy in the main dining room." He avoided her eyes. "For your own good, and to calm things down, I'm temporarily transferring you to the dish pit, washing dishes, prepping silverware, far away from the customer's eyes, until the dust settles." The proposal was a punch. The dish pit, the lowest rung on the restaurant hierarchy, a noisy, humid exile. It was a dismissal disguised as protection, a way to make her invisible, to erase her existence from the main dining room. Her dignity, the very thing she fought so hard to protect, was being systematically dismantled. First, the ban on her daughter. Now, her own banishment. She tasted the metallic flavor of despair in her mouth. Every step forward she took seemed to result in 2 steps back. She looked at her own hands, calloused from the bakery work, and thought of Sophia. How could she draw a happy ending if the villains kept rewriting the story with increasingly dark ink? Accepting the dish pit meant admitting defeat. Refusing meant, once again, certain unemployment. This obstacle seemed the cruelest of all because it attacked not her wallet, but her identity. Arthur learned of Elisa's transfer to the dish pit through Chef Jean-Pierre. The news enraged him. Richard's strategy was cowardly, and Veronica's villainous. He realized discretion was no longer working. Silence, which he valued so highly, was being interpreted as weakness. It was time to speak, but he would do so on his own terms, within the rules of the place that had become the unlikely battlefield. That very night, he made a dinner reservation. Not a discreet table in the corner, but the central table, the one where it all began. He arrived punctually, dressed with a sober elegance that commanded respect. The room fell silent for an instant upon his arrival. Richard rushed to greet him, his smile more forced than ever. The dinner was a silent ritual. Arthur ate slowly, observing everything. He noted the glances of other patrons, the tension in the servers' shoulders, Elisa's absence from the room. At the end of the service, When most tables were asking for the check and the ambient music had been lowered, he made a subtle gesture to Richard. "I'd like to say a few words, if you'll allow me, to everyone." Richard froze. A speech. Here. It broke every protocol. But he looked into Arthur's eyes and knew he couldn't refuse. He now knew who Arthur was, not just a wealthy client, but one of the silent owners of this empire. With a trembling nod, he consented. Arthur didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. His calm, firm tone was more powerful than any shout. He cleared his throat, and the clinking of silverware ceased completely. "Good evening, everyone. I apologize for interrupting your dinner. My name is Arthur, and like some of you, I'm a frequent customer of this establishment." He paused, his gaze sweeping the room. "A few days ago, at this very table, I witnessed an act of profound tastelessness, and then an act of profound courage." He mentioned no names. He didn't need to. Everyone knew what he was talking about. "I have learned over the years that a disability is not a tragedy. It is a characteristic, like eye color or height. But sometimes it is seen by others as an invitation. An invitation to test the character of the person viewing it. A test that, unfortunately, many fail." He looked directly at Richard. "I have also learned that in times of injustice, silence is not neutrality. Silence is a choice. It takes the oppressor's side. The true elegance, the true class that a place like this preaches is not in pretending nothing happened. It is in defending what is right, even if it is uncomfortable," he concluded, his voice echoing in the stunned room. "Thank you for your attention." For a moment, there was only silence. Then, from a table in the back, one person began to applaud. Soon, another followed, and then another. Within seconds, the entire dining room was applauding. It wasn't a booming, showy applause, but a contained, respectful applause, a unanimous acknowledgement of the truth in his words. Richard, leaning against the wall, was pale as a ghost. He feared Veronica's reprisal, but the room's support for Arthur was undeniable. Even so, he made no formal announcement. He just promised, once again, to reevaluate. For Arthur, the cost of this exposure came quickly. The next morning, anonymous messages began flooding his social media. Cruel memes ridiculed his wheelchair. Venomous comments exposed details of his private life. Insinuations that his fortune perhaps didn't compensate for his condition. His greatest internal conflict, the fear of becoming a symbol, an inspirational wheelchair user, rather than just a person, throbbed intensely. He had exposed himself. He had become vulnerable. And in the dish pit of the conservatory, Elisa, upon hearing of the speech via a message from Clara, cried for the first time. They were tears of gratitude and fear. The battle was escalating, and she was at the center of a hurricane she no longer knew how to stop. The day of the supposed public apology dawned under a sky of lead, foreshadowing the emotional storm to come. Veronica, completely ignoring Arthur's speech and the room's reaction, decided to proceed with her plan. For her, this was a matter of power, and retreating would mean admitting weakness. She arrived at the conservatory accompanied by her consultant and a photographer, turning the restaurant entrance into a small media circus. Richard met them at the door, his face contorted in a smile that looked more like a grimace of pain. He had summoned Elisa, who had left the dampness of the dish pit behind and donned her service uniform again, feeling like a prisoner being led to her own execution. The scene was set by the bar, with lighting carefully adjusted by the photographer to favor Veronica. On the marble counter lay a document. It was a contract. Veronica's consultant pushed it toward Elisa with the tips of his fingers. "It's quite simple," he said condescendingly. "A confidentiality agreement. You admit your daughter's inappropriate behavior, formally apologize to Ms. Veronica for the emotional stress caused, and in return, she will not only withdraw the threat of a lawsuit, but will also make an anonymous donation to a charity of your choice. We take a photo of the handshake, and the matter is closed." Every word was an insult. The donation was a way to buy her silence, to turn her daughter's dignity into a charitable item. Elisa looked at Veronica, who stared back with a triumphant smile, certain of her victory. She looked at Richard, who was looking away, focused on arranging some glasses that were already perfectly aligned. And she thought of Sophia. She thought of the drawing they made together. The night she returned from the bakery, exhausted. The drawing of a different ending. In that moment, something settled inside her. The fear didn't vanish, but it was now accompanied by a fierce calm. The calm of someone who has nothing left to lose. She took a deep breath, and she refused. "No," she said, her voice low but unshakable. "I will not sign this." The consultant laughed, incredulous. "I don't think you understand your position here." "Oh, I understand perfectly," Elisa retorted. She pulled a folded piece of paper from her apron pocket. It was from Sophia's notebook. With steady hands, she unfolded it. It was a letter, written in the neat handwriting she had helped her daughter perfect. In a clear, loud voice, so that the photographer and the few staff present could hear, she read, "Ms. Veronica, I apologize. I apologize for failing to protect you from what you were capable of saying. I apologize for my silence, having allowed you to feel comfortable humiliating a person in front of me and in front of my daughter. And above all, I apologize to my daughter for not having the courage she had." The charade collapsed. Veronica's smile vanished. The consultant stood speechless. The photographer lowered his camera, uncertain. The silence in the room was heavy, broken only by the distant sound of the kitchen. Richard finally turned, his face a mixture of shock and something that looked like reluctant respect. The lunch customers beginning to arrive, including the group of tea ladies who had made a strategic reservation, witnessed the scene from the doorway. The humiliation Veronica had planned backfired spectacularly. With a face red with anger, she hissed, "You will regret this. I will destroy this house. I will ruin you all." The threat hung in the air, but for the first time, it sounded hollow, the roar of a queen who had just lost her throne. Veronica's threat, "I will destroy this house," was no bluff. Her influence, though shaken, was still a web extending throughout the city. In the hours following Elisa's refusal, the conservatory's phones wouldn't stop ringing. It was the suppliers, the premium wine distributor, citing a logistics issue, cancelled the weekend cellar delivery. The seafood supplier, one of the most exclusive in the region, reported that a contamination scare would prevent them from delivering the lobster and scallops, the mainstays of the Saturday night menu. Even the florist who decorated the dining room called, saying all their white orchids had wilted suddenly. The boycott was real, surgical, and devastating. Richard paced his office, sweat beading on his forehead. Shipwreck was imminent. Faced with the chaos, Arthur acted. He summoned Richard for an emergency meeting, not as a client, but as what he truly was, an investor. The revelation was made without fanfare. Arthur simply presented the documents proving his equity stake in the chain. Richard's expression shifted from panic to submission in seconds. He finally understood that his neutrality had a real cost and that he had backed the wrong horse. The businessman, however, was not there to punish. He was there to build. "Veronica wants to turn this house into a cemetery," Arthur said, his voice calm but charged with urgency. "We are going to turn it into a garden." His proposal was audacious. Instead of cancelling Saturday night, they would transform it into an event, the official launch of the conservatory's new respect and inclusion policy, mandatory training for the entire staff, and the opening of a public position for a person with a disability at the front desk. It was a way to turn poison into antidote, but the obstacles were immense. The first came from within. Arthur contacted the chain's board, which split. Some feared staining the brand with what they considered activism, preferring a silent solution. The second obstacle was practical: how to stage a gala event without the main ingredients and with the threat of an empty dining room. This is where the resources sown over those 2 weeks began to bloom. Arthur refused to use cronyism or seek last-minute solutions outside the universe the story had created. He activated the base of loyal customers who had applauded him. Mrs. Cecilia and the afternoon tea ladies organized a phone chain, ensuring their networks would pack the restaurant. Jean-Pierre, the chef, gathered the kitchen staff. With the respect they held for Arthur and their loyalty to Elisa, they embraced the challenge. "We don't have lobsters. We'll make the best moqueca this dining room has ever seen. Out of French wine, we have award-winning craft spirits that pair perfectly." The kitchen, which had previously operated with Swiss clock precision, now pulsed with the creativity and warmth of Brazilian cuisine. Simple ingredients, sourced from local vendors and neighborhood markets, were mobilized. Warm pão de queijo instead of imported rolls. Organic vegetables from one of the cook's gardens, and for dessert, a classic brigadeiro served with the elegance of a crystal cup. While the kitchen was buzzing, another piece fell into place. Arthur invited an accessibility consultant to conduct the emergency training. She wasn't a stranger. She was Ms. Martins, a wheelchair-using patron who had frequented the restaurant quietly for years and who had supported Arthur's speech with a nod. She accepted immediately. The final puzzle piece came from an unexpected source. Elisa, seeing the mobilization, had an idea. She spoke with Arthur, and on Saturday afternoon, Sophia entered the conservatory for the first time since the incident, not hidden, but as the guest of honor, wearing a temporary badge that read Design Assistant Intern. Her task was simple and powerful: assemble the linen napkins, placing on each table a small illustration of hers, with simple phrases about respect. The little artist was back, not as a problem, but as an essential part of the solution. Saturday night arrived, not with the conservatory's usual pomp, but with a different energy, a mix of anxiety and purpose. The dining room, which Richard feared would be empty, was packed. The tea ladies had kept their promise, bringing friends, children, and grandchildren. Long-time customers who had stayed away returned, curious and hopeful. The decor was simpler, lacking the sumptuous orchids, but the tables were adorned with Sophia's small drawings, each a touch of color and conscience. Instead of classic piano music, a guitarist played choro and bossa nova, filling the room with genuine Brazilian warmth. The smell was not of truffles and French butter, but of fresh cilantro, palm oil, and hot chocolate from the brigadeiro. It was the conservatory, but at the same time, it was a completely new place. Elisa, unofficially promoted by Jean-Pierre to lead service for the evening, moved through the room with a confidence she had never possessed. She wasn't just serving tables, she was taking care of her guests, explaining the concept of the new menu, sharing the story behind each improvised dish. There was a real connection, an exchange of looks and smiles that went beyond protocol. The staff, inspired by Elisa's leadership and the atmosphere of solidarity, worked in perfect harmony. There was no longer fear or whispering, only the pride of being part of something significant. At the height of the dinner, a group of 3 people entered the restaurant discreetly. They were members of the Chains Board who had come to observe what they called Arthur's risky experiment. They sat at a table in the back, their expressions skeptical. Arthur, monitoring them from his table, felt a knot of tension. The future of his initiative and the restaurant itself depended on the perception of these men and women. One of them, a stern-looking woman with grey hair pulled into a tight bun, the group's main shareholder, seemed particularly displeased. She watched everything with critical eyes: the improvised menu, the popular music, the children's drawings on the tables. It was then that the moment of greatest tension occurred. The board member, Ms. Amelia, signaled the waiter. "I would like to speak with the person responsible for this," she said, pointing disdainfully at the small, illustrated napkin on her table. Richard, nearby, felt his blood run cold. It was the end. He approached, ready to apologize, to take the blame for anything to save the evening. But before he could speak, Arthur stepped forward, maneuvering his chair up to the table. "I am responsible, Ms. Amelia. Is there a problem?" The tension was so thick you could cut it with a knife. The entire dining room, sensing the gravity of the moment, fell silent. The guitarist stopped playing. Ms. Amelia picked up the napkin. The drawing was simple: 3 chairs of different heights, and a fourth, a wheelchair, perfectly level with the tallest one. The caption, written by Sophia, "The right table welcomes everyone." The woman looked at the drawing for a long time. Then she raised her eyes, not to Arthur, but searching the room. Her gaze met Elisa's, and then she did something no one expected. She smiled, a small, almost imperceptible smile, but one that completely changed the atmosphere. "A problem, Arthur? No, quite the contrary." She turned to Richard. "I want to see the other one. The original. The one that says the right table doesn't humiliate. Bring it to me." In that moment, the fate of the conservatory and everyone present was sealed, hanging on the balance of a linen napkin and the wisdom of a 7-year-old girl. Richard, his hands trembling, went to his office and returned with the original napkin, which Arthur had entrusted to him earlier. He handed it to Mrs. Amelia as if it were a state document. She unfolded it carefully, smoothing the fabric on the table. She read the phrase, "The right table doesn't humiliate," and studied the childish sketch for what felt like an eternity. The other 2 board members leaned in to see, exchanging unreadable glances. The silence of the room was absolute, a blank canvas upon which the future would be painted. Finally, Ms. Amelia lifted her head. Her eyes met Elisa's, who watched the scene. Her heart stopped in her chest, gripping Sophia's hand, who had come up beside her. "This phrase, Ms. Amelia said, her voice clear and firm, breaking the silence, "will not just be the motto for one event. Starting today, it will be the motto for our entire chain's new program for inclusion and service excellence." The declaration fell over the dining room like a summer rain. A murmur of approval swept through the tables. She then turned to Elisa. "And an initiative like this needs a leader who understands its essence. Miss Elisa, I would like to offer you the position of room leader and chief trainer for this new program. Your job will be to ensure that no table sit in any of our restaurants ever humiliates anyone again." Elisa was speechless. The tears she had held back for 2 weeks finally came, but they were not of pain or fear. They were of relief, of validation. She could only nod. A sob of gratitude caught in her throat. Sophia, beside her, smiled, a radiant smile that lit up the entire room. Arthur, standing near the board table, felt a weight lift from his shoulders. The victory was not his. It belonged to all of them, to the courage of a little girl, the resilience of a mother, the solidarity of strangers. In that moment of collective triumph, the restaurant door opened. Veronica, having been informed by some spy that the house was full and the event was a success, came to witness what she imagined would be the last gasp of her enemies. But the scene she found was that of her complete defeat. The dining room was applauding, not for a spectacle, but for a decision. People were hugging. Ms. Amelia was standing, shaking Elisa's hand. Without a stage, without an audience for her fury, Veronica stood paralyzed. As she tried to retreat silently, she ran right into Mrs. Cecilia's table and the afternoon tea ladies. They looked at her, not with hatred, but with cold indifference. "Dear," said Mrs. Cecilia, adjusting her shawl, "we were just scheduling our next reservations. There are so many new restaurants in town that seem to have gotten the memo, where the bill pays not just for the food, but for character." That was the final blow. Humiliated, without uttering a word, Veronica turned and left, swallowed by the night. Richard, pale, approached the board table, ready to receive his sentence. But Amelia merely handed him a pen. "Manager, prepare the official memo. The change starts now." The arc of his journey closed. The man who confused peace with a mission was now tasked with announcing the new era of accountability. The subplot of the friendship between Elisa and Jean-Pierre tied up when he brought a steaming platter of mini pain de queijo from the kitchen, a treat from the team for their new boss. The bond between Sophia and Arthur solidified when he officially invited her to create a series of drawings for the inclusive signage across all chain restaurants. Justice, finally, hadn't arrived like lightning, but had settled gently, like an essential ingredient that had always been missing from the menu. The night at the conservatory stretched on, but the energy didn't diminish. It transformed into a serene, almost familial celebration. The applause following Veronica's exit wasn't one of mockery, but of collective relief. A mature applause for recognizing the effort and overcoming a long, arduous journey. The dining room, now bathed in warmer light and the soft melody of the acoustic guitar, seemed to breathe for the first time. Conversations flowed, food was shared with greater relish, and glasses were raised not just for closed deals, but for re-established human connections. The success of that night hadn't been a stroke of luck, but the result of small seeds of courage and decency planted in the arid soil of indifference, which had finally bloomed. Elisa, exhausted but with a lightness she hadn't felt in years, watched everything from a corner next to Arthur. The room leader badge Richard had improvised for her seemed more valuable than any jewel. She looked at her hands, which just days ago were cracked from cheap detergent in the cold dawn of a bakery, and saw the hands of a woman who had rediscovered her strength. The costs of this victory had been high: sleepless nights, docked wages, public shame, constant fear. But the reward was immeasurable. She hadn't just kept her job, she had earned a place of respect, a future for her daughter, and most importantly, the integrity of her soul. Arthur, feeling her gaze, spoke quietly. "Sophia is a great artist," he smiled and added, "and starting today, she is officially my napkin security consultant. No one will dare disrespect the house rules again." The joke cemented an unlikely friendship, forged in the fire of adversity. Later, discreetly, Arthur picked up the tab for every table that had supported the staff, a silent gesture of gratitude worth more than any speech. The wheelchair-using consultant, Ms. Martins, was already discussing the details of the first training session with Elisa, her professional expression lit up by contagious enthusiasm. She finally had the chance to apply her ideas on a large scale. At the end of the night, as the last patrons said their goodbyes with hugs and promises to return, the scent of warm brigadeiro still lingered in the air, a sweet perfume of victory and new beginnings. Elisa walked through the empty dining room with Sophia. The little girl, sleepy-eyed, stopped at the central table, the same one where it all began, now clean and set, ready for a new day. She took a clean linen napkin and a pencil she kept in her pocket. Quickly, she drew 3 figures, a woman, a man in a wheelchair, and a little girl, all sitting at the same table, smiling. And all 3 chairs were exactly the same height. The caption, written with the simplicity of universal truth, was the one Ms. Amelia had read earlier. "The right table welcomes everyone." Elisa took the drawing, her heart overflowing. Justice, she realized, was not a spectacular event, but a standard of respect, of inclusion, of dignity. It was the table where everyone could sit as equals. Looking at her daughter, yawning on her hip, she finally felt she had managed to draw that different ending. An ending that was not just happy, but just... And in the silence of the mirrored dining room, under the golden light of the chandeliers, the promise of a new tomorrow finally seemed real, inspiring, and deliciously sweet.